Hey guys, and welcome to this tutorial of platinum silicone swollen cut encapsulated with Super Baldiez. So one of the reasons why I've used Super Baldiez with Platsil Gel 00 is because it allows you to kind of blend away those edges much nicer than just using silicone. Because when you use silicone, you can't blend those edges unless you add more silicone to kind of blend it in with your skin. And it can be really awkward to work with, but by using Super Baldiez you can use 99% alcohol just to nicely blend those edges away once it's kind of stuck down using, I don't know, Prozaid or something similar. So yeah, hopefully you enjoy this and find it useful. If you do, then please hit that like button and enjoy. Now, as you can see, the mold that I created of this kind of swollen cut or scar was done with the platinum silicone itself. So it was using Platsil Gel 00. So you would think it would be quite soft, but actually it works pretty well. What I decided to do was to use Vaseline to kind of be the release from the Super Baldiez that I was going to paint on. Although silicone does not actually stick to anything apart from silicone, so even if I didn't use a release, it probably would have been fine. But just to be sure, I did put a really thin layer and then rub off the excess with tissue. As you can see, I've got here as well, I've got 99% alcohol and Super Baldiez, so I just kind of put in a little bit of Super Baldiez. Didn't need an awful lot for this particular layer, and then topped it off with with an equal kind of amount of 99% alcohol. And the key thing here is to try and get a really thin layer, so kind of brushing it in various directions just to make sure it kind of gets into every nook and cranny of the mold itself. So we want a really good spread on there, and making sure you're working those edges too. Now, I did a couple of layers there actually. I did probably about, I think, 2 to 3 layers. So 3 just to be sure, but you don't want to go too thick either, so 2 is probably going to be enough. And now, as you can see, I'm going to be putting together my Platsil Gel 00. Whenever I work with silicone, I always wear these gloves. They're latex free gloves, because latex will inhibit the cure or can do of the silicone. So as you can see here, I'm just sort of putting in equal amounts. Well, I'm going to start with the part A of the silicone. A quick tip: whenever you're working and trying to work on color tones and putting pigmentation into your silicone, do not mix part A and B first. Always just put in the A part and then work in the color and then add the part B, because it is a chemical reaction, guys. So as soon as you mix part A and part B of the silicone, it's going to start reacting, giving you just a kind of 6-minute work time, 6 minutes or less. Now, as you can see, those are my silicone pigments. I've got skin flesh tones, also got some flocking, a bit of red, which I'm going to start by putting in there just to kind of break up the skin tone. If you look at your own skin, there are lots of little kind of red specks and dots from the capillaries, and then putting in a bit of the flesh tone flocking as well, and then going in with some of the pigments. So I mix like a light and a dark flesh tone, just because it gives me a really nice kind of color that I'm quite happy with. So it's making sure I'm just putting a small amount of the actual silicone pigment, because that is a concentrated amount, so I've really just worked on putting a tiny little amount in. Now, it was a little bit difficult working with such a small amount of silicone. Now, this is only half the amount, and there's an idea of what the color is, of course, and you can see it's quite nicely broken up. Not exactly easy to see on the camera, but next I went in with the part B. So again, using a separate wooden stirrer just to put in that amount. Do not use the same stick, otherwise you'll be contaminating the B part, and you definitely do not want to be doing that. So yeah, put in the equal amount of part B and then mix it up, and I was quite happy with the color tone. I didn't want it to be too solid, the tone. I want it to be kind of just like skin actually is, so I left it, and it was quite nice. It wasn't sort of too intense. And then I've just sort of put this on in the middle. I've just started to pour it in and to spread it in. Now it's very important that I kind of work this into all the detailing of the mold. So as you can see I'm doing here, I'm being very gentle, not to kind of damage it of course. And yeah, so I worked it into all the scar itself, and then went in with a clean wooden stick. I call it wooden stick, wooden spatula, whatever you want to call it, just to kind of flatten off the top. And then I went in with the Q-tip just to pick up that extra silicone. Now, and also work in the edges because that's important. Just to give a nice thin edge, because you still want to be working that in. Now, it's so important that you make sure that there's no silicone sort of around the edge, because that's what you're going to be using 99% alcohol to kind of, you know, disintegrate and to blend away those that Super Baldiez edge. So you really want to make sure. Now, you know, you probably don't want to be using your finger. I did, just because I'm one of those people that like to use my fingers for stuff. That kind of sounded wrong, but anyway, it kind of worked quite well, and as you can see, it was nicely cleaned up, and that's what you want. You know, you want that kind of clear edge on the outside. So once the silicone cured, which took around about 20 minutes, I'd say, to half an hour, I'd say about half an hour, I went in with one final coating of Super Baldiez, then exactly the same way, sort of equal amounts of 99% alcohol with Super Baldiez, and then I just did that final layer. So once that, you know, was dry after about sort of 10 minutes, I went in with some talcum powder. Any will do, but try and use a non-fragrance one. Mine has a very strong smell, which I don't really like, but it's what I've got, so I'd sort of work with it. And then I just kind of really carefully picked out the edge, and it is really thin, so you want to be really careful here, guys. You want to actually be putting in talcum powder as soon as you start pulling that away, just to avoid it sticking. And that's actually coming out really, really nice. Yeah, I was really pleased with the result here. Yeah, and that's the finished cast, guys. That is the Silicone Gel 00, Platsil Gel 00 with the encapsulated Super Baldiez. So perfect. And soon I'll be releasing a application video as well as makeup with it as well, so stay tuned.